I think that's it. We are live and let's get started. All right. Thank you all for joining. This is our first actually in a series of webinars that we have planned here from Karate Labs. I am Peter, the co-founder and of Karate Labs and the creator of the Karate Test Automation Framework that I think some of you know about and some of you may be hearing about for the first time. And the reason we are doing this is, to give you a little bit of context, I actually quit my day job almost a year back to focus full time on karate. And one of the reasons that I did that was, because of stories that you're about to hear today from some of our enterprise users that they are using karate a lot, and it seemed like a big responsibility that we needed to actually make sure that people are getting the best out of karate, and it continues. And we also heard from some of our users that they would like to hear about stories as to how other enterprise users are using karate, and that would help. And of course, all of you who may be hearing about karate for the first time or are completely new to karate, welcome. Hopefully you'll get some data points that can go back. I intend to make this quite interactive. I shall introduce Gek shortly. And yeah, free-flowing conversation. Feel free to plug in your questions into the Zoom interface wherever appropriate. And with that, let me just introduce our esteemed panelist, Gek, for a minute. And Gek is a senior quality and automation coach at SAP UK. She has professional Scrum Master and Prince2 project management qualifications. Over 20 years of IT experience, she has witnessed the change from on-premise software to cloud services. She is very familiar with agile methodologies as a Scrum mistress and quality assurance expert. As an innovator, she seeks continuous improvement in automation through fixing pain points and building team strength. Besides technical contributions, she firmly believes in empowering the next generation with technology and social enterprise through various SAP corporate social responsibility initiatives as Enactus UK business coach and judge, African Code Week judge, and SAP Code Week. It all started with her SAP social sabbatical in 2015, acting as an SAP design thinking consultant to assist an NGO client in Colombia with digital business transformation. That trip inspired her servant leadership. And since then, she participates in both local and global initiatives, continuing that motto and theme to this day. Welcome, Gek. Thank you so much for sharing time with us, and welcome to this fireside chat, Gek.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Kapil, for inviting me over. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So let's get straight into it. Gek, to start with, tell us about your journey, what kind of work you're doing and how you progressed and landed at what you're doing today. Go ahead.
So since the age of 12, I got my first computer and I built my first robot at the age of 19. So I exposed to AI and automations and robotics. And I did my degrees in computer science. As such, it's natural that I go into software development. And I start off from an intern and then become a full-fledged developer back in Singapore. And I was quite lucky to have the international transfer to SAP UK. So I moved from the Singapore office to UK office. However, that required me a job role change. So instead of doing product development, I moved into product support as a third level product support engineer. So I help out with some premium customer like BlackRock, United Health Group. And so it helps me to bring myself back to where the customer is using our software and see their pain points of using software and troubleshooting and understanding customer environments. So no longer I was in the background, but I was in front, helping with customer escalation. That helped me a lot because I was like doing share markdown analysis, reverse engineering, trying to find out why all these problems occur and not being found at the point when we were developing the code. And customer are the best tester we have. And then there's an opportunity for me to move into commerce, SAP Commerce as a QA engineer. So I decided to complete the full cycle and move back to development. And ever since, I'm helping the team to grow in automation, in quality, both as a Scrum Mistress and also as a automation coach. So that's why I see all the changes from floppy disk to cloud-based storage, from on-premise software to microservices. Yeah, that's my whole
Awesome.
history.
From floppy disks to all the way to the cloud. That's brilliant. And I can certainly relate to a lot of that. Awesome. I mean, and certainly you have seen your fair share of all kinds of environments, all kind of different systems that you need to test. And of course, I really appreciate that, with your experience in customer support, you have a very strong sense as to what a tester or someone in quality assurance needs. Tell us, Gek, about what do you think in general, right? If you look back over the last, many years of your career, regarding test automation, what are the things that come to your mind? Was it good? Was it challenging? Was it hard? Just talk through it a little bit.
Yes, so from the very beginning, we were not so fortunate as now. All right.
Okay.
We have to build our own custom-made framework. We have to write our own testing framework, because not much are available. So we will don't have this luxury of like going into the market and choose. So now we are quite lucky, like, karate, even though it's not new in the market, but to me, it was new at that time when I found it. So I was quite lucky to find karate, and that is something that I could see. So at this point, right, there's a lot of testing framework available for different kind of application, like mobile app, micro front end, and we have like testing framework that we have machine learning, AI, and so it requires a bit of drilling and experience to fine tune to find what's best framework works best for your product. So you need to understand your product requirement to choose the right testing framework, and also what works best for your team, because some framework requires more technical skills. And do you have the people who have those technical skills to use those frameworks? That is another consideration point.
Awesome. Can you talk us through a little bit of what all have you tried? And yes, we will get to karate in a moment, and certainly understand from you how it made a change and all that. But before karate, how would you, characterize, how would you talk about how things were? I got a sense, yeah, there are frameworks, some of them are very hard, maybe developers, you talked about, some of them requiring development skills. But what were the things that you found, hard to navigate? Go ahead, Gek.
Yeah, so some of the framework, they didn't have good support, and within a few years they disappeared. So the community adoption of the framework is important. So I will always I will lean towards the framework that are easy to use, because you want to open up to the public and make sure it's not a niche area where only some people can use it. And we have many people that come in, which is originally doesn't come from a programming background, and retrain and become developer and become tester. So we need something that is very versatile. So I was going towards, and it also takes time to build your own framework. So you have to understand in your own product roadmap, time is something that you can afford to wait, right? And so for my side is I always have this few criteria on testing framework. Is it scalable? Is it usable? What is the total cost of ownership to use it? And what is the support behind it? And whether my team are able to learn to use it. So the learning curve is important. Yeah. So yeah.
I think that's a fantastic list, and I completely agree about. And I've been there, I have in my career seen so many open source frameworks come and go. They disappear, and you make that kind of horrible choice where you choose it and your whole team, your company is into it. You also stick your neck out saying, I chose this framework, and then it disappears and no support. Yeah, that is certainly a worry. And I completely agree about the fact that some of them are also too hard or complex to use. And you made a great point, which I think we'll deep dive into more, which is, yeah, not everyone is a great developer. You need, maybe a more accessible, more friendly framework to really get the best out of your team. And this is great. So can you talk us through how you found karate? I know that's probably and that's the time we kind of I remember we kind of met in that series of events. But can you talk us through what went through your mind when you found karate? You talked about karate kind of being new to you at the time you found it, obviously.
Yes, a few years
Go ahead,
ago.
like,
Yeah, but now it's not new.
now it's
Now it's
not
an
new, of course.
established player, but at that time it was just like, I think it was 2 years into it. Yeah. So
Cool.
I was faced with a challenge. So I have a very diverse team with a different technical capability and coming from different background, and I have to think of something which is easy to use and doesn't require a very steep learning curve, and able to do API UI testing, and I need to understand they are able to write user end-to-end test case using this framework. So it must be a lot of like very given when, then it's more like a feature, right? Like rather than just just like how we write less user focused test cases. Yeah. So I need to find a framework that can fix into that mentality of my tester or my QA expert. And given that not all of them have different, they all was like more focused on manual testing. So I need to help them to adapt their mentality to automation. So I don't want to scare them off with a very complex framework, because it's like cooking. You need to have a good knife, easy to use knife. Simple is very beautiful. So for me, it's like karate is like a Swiss knife. So I can help them, do something very quickly, and they like using it. So I thought this fulfill all my tick boxes. So we will do it a POC, and after we agreed using the karate as a framework from the success of the POC, I went into the mock programming with them, because that is the faster way I can see I can ramp up with a team, a big group of people with different skill sets, because mock programming is quite intensive, and you have to, within 4-hour session, it was like 3 hours, and it's a group of I have two of different groups, and each group has like about 6 engineers. So these 6 engineers, each of them will take a turn to become a driver, and then they have to use karate and write one test case. So after 2 mock programming sessions, they managed to write their first test case in karate, even though they have no karate background. So I was quite pleased with that, and since then we decided to let the whole commerce to learn about karate and use it. It's one of our recommended framework, and that's where we approach Peter to hire the author to learn
Yeah.
more about karate, because we realize documentation is not enough for us, because we want to write more and more karate test cases. Yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, I never get tired of hearing that story. Thanks for sharing that, Gek. And you mentioned hire the author. Yeah, it's through this portal that I got connected to Gek and learned about their use of karate. And I'm sure if the creator of Hire the Author is listening, I'm sure that will make him very happy that he helped make this connection. This is brilliant. I want to go on a little bit of a detour here and just talk about mob programming for a minute, because I find that personally quite interesting. I'm sure a lot of folks who are attending online would find this interesting, because I've not done mob programming at all. I've heard about it. I've always been very, very curious as to how it works. And I have done a fair share of what you call pair programming, which
yes, between 2 and 3. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And to me, mob programming seems to be like pair programming taken to extremes. Okay, it
Yeah.
may or may not be, I think, okay, great. And but I find this fascinating because if I'm not mistaken, you said your team,
With a
you were able to
diverse
get,
technical capability. So
and with,
when they go in, right, some of them know how to use IDE, some of them have just started to learn how to use IDE, and we have to do virtual, so it's online. So they have to share their screen. So when we start the sessions, I inform them that there's no judgment. Everybody, please feel free to share your screen. All I require was the 3 hours of commitment and willing to be the driver. So everybody takes turn to be the driver. And from there, I can, as a coach, see the different capability and skill set of each team member. And so when we finish the whole 3 series, so it's 2 workshops for each region. So we have 3 series. So after we finish that, I was able to pair those which are one of them, which is quite technically very strong, with the other weaker to help them. So it's more like buddy system. Through the mock programming, I'm able to make observations for that. Otherwise, it's quite difficult from the day-to-day job to understand all their capability in a very fast time. So I need that to be done very quickly. And that mock programming helped me to achieve that, because through their screen sharing, I roughly have an idea where they stand, and I'm able to pair them so that they will have a support and they won't be drifting away. Because sometimes when you feel that you are not doing good at something, you feel discouraged and you don't want to do it anymore. And for I want to encourage them to do automations and let them feel like, oh, okay, actually I can do this. And that's right. What I will do manually into, simple test steps, into karate test case, and watch those clicking done automatically, or I just fire this API and they will retrieve the results for me. I don't have to, fire it off through Postman, things like that. Yeah, so that's why I do it this way. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, there's so much there to actually unpack. And let me get this straight, Gig. You said people were screen sharing and online. So your team were in pretty much different
Virtual.
places, right? It was a remote team.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is super powerful. And of course, I'm making a note, and I'm sure folks on the call are making notes to self that we need to try mob programming, because Gig, it
Definitely.
sounds super cool, right? You basically get
Yeah.
your whole team, all of them, onto this one call. You of course get a commitment of 3 hours in, I don't know, a few sessions,
Yeah.
and on one hand, yes, you're trying to minimize the amount of time needed for folks to ramp up,
Ramping up. Yeah.
right? And I love the way that you're actually watching out for the weaker ones and the the more competent ones, and kind of helping each other level up, right? And then you let them drive, as you said. You make sure that you see what they're doing, so you can you can take some corrective action and feedback. I think it's just brilliant, and I'm certainly going to look out for opportunities to try mob programming.
Yeah.
And certainly some of the tips that you shared are super relevant for me when I do trainings, right? Because I think when you do training for a large team, it's quite easy if you're not careful, you might lose some of the trainees, the people in the training, because they are like silent. You don't know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and then they
I
start
think
to drop off, or they will feel
yeah,
like they
right.
are watching a movie, and then they say, okay, I'm done with my popcorn. Disappeared. It's like, come back. But when they have to be the driver throughout these 3 hours, they know they have to be. It's inevitable. They will be like focusing. Yeah. And they know, okay, I'm going to be the driver after after the person. So I have to see what she's doing on the console. And so I will be able to write that piece of code later on. Yeah. And it's, oh, actually, I'm not too sure. Can you repeat? So it helps in the end, yeah, to get people to be more focused on during the mock programming session. I do recommend you don't do it often, because it can really make people tired because of the high concentration they have to do it in the session. Yeah. So it's like taking exam. It's not recommend you take exam every day, but it's very
Yeah,
useful
yeah.
exercise. to
I
do
can
it once
imagine.
in a while to keep people engaged. Yeah.
No, brilliant. Yeah, as you said, I can imagine that it's probably a lot more intense than the typical Zoom meeting that we have,
Mm,
because everyone is contributing almost at the same time.
yes.
That's very interesting, and I'm going to think more about it because yeah, I've never done mob programming, heard a lot about it, heard of
Mm,
teams really having good things, and I'm sure it
mm,
certainly sounds like you folks have kind of hit upon a very interesting formula to bring your whole team up to speed. And then
mm.
another thing that struck me before I forget, let me just speak my
I mean,
mind here.
if you have a small team, instead of mob
Yeah,
programming, what you can do is pair programming or buddy programming. Yeah,
right.
that's the recommend one. Yeah,
And,
because I
and
have a
building on,
huge team and I can't. It's at the beginning, I need to run them out quickly using the framework so they can start writing their first test case. That's why I use mob programming. Yeah, but after that, once they learn how to use the framework, that means the fundamental of how to write a test and compile the test and see the test run in action, I let them move on to pair programming or to let them have a taking their
and
yeah learning from here. Mm,
speaking of pair programming, Jake, right?
mm.
And this mob
Oh, pair
contains,
programming, you can do it regularly. You can do it daily.
yeah,
It's
yes,
no problem.
yeah, and um, you had how much was the mix of like core developers versus testing and non-developers in the group? Is it like you had people of both types, right? In
Yes,
meetings?
yes. I have a group of a very high different spectrums.
You have
The
a
spectrum
spectrum.
is yeah, it's very high. Yeah, so that's why
And
I have to use mock programming to bridge the gap quickly to make sure they all understand on the same level how to
right.
compile the code, how to run the code, how to use the IDE, how to transform their user story, their manual test step into automation, right?
Yes,
So
and I just want to build on that this is what I was it was just registering in my mind that this is a very
mm,
powerful way for you to have, typically in many companies, the groups of developers and the testers are kind of at odds, right? There's so many
mm,
jokes on the internet of, developers fighting with the QA folks. And I
mm,
think what
mm,
you've done is actually a very amazing way to, kind of address that.
mm,
And I can feel, right, when you do this exercise, mob programming, you're going to have the developers have empathy for the testers. For example, if you don't have proper selectors in your UI, your testing team is
mm,
going to struggle, right? And if
mm.
the developers understand and actually go through that pain, things are going to be better. And vice versa, I can quite, I can clearly see how all the knowledge about the customer, the flows transfer from, the testers who typically know more about the domain and the end user, and
Yes.
that knowledge flows back to the developer. So I think it's awesome. I'm going
Yeah,
to,
the user journey. So they are able to bring the
yeah,
broader picture in, and they want to find
yes,
a way to encapsulate into the test case. And you want to change also the mentality that automation is not hard. Yeah, automation is easy. You want them to understand that it's actually quite easy to efficient to write automation tests than doing all those steps manually clicking, which is can be quite repetitive, and they are better off using those time to do high quality uh task, right? Writing better user story or doing organizing bug hunting for exploratory testing, things that help them to expand further than just doing repetitive manual testing. Yeah, so
brilliant, brilliant. And another point that struck me is that the advantage of having, as you said, maybe a more friendly, not so scary testing framework
mm,
is, and if you're actually able to get the folks who are, non-programmers productive
non-technical.
right with the test,
mm,
these tests are probably going to be a lot more, as you said, having the user journeys,
mm,
part of the flow, and probably better at actually representing the end user, which is what you want to do in testing actually. So yeah, I think I can only think of good things, but noted, you shouldn't do too much of mod programming. Is probably intense, but it sounds great. And lots to think about there.
Yes, and also
Yeah.
another thing that's why I chose Character Framework is that we can use API together with UI testing. So being an automation coach, I have seen many times where UI automation tester, they like to use UI interaction to set out data. And that is not very efficient. If you can have the API to set out data, tearing it down later on, cleaning it out later on, in between you interact with what you want to test for the UI, is actually makes much more sense for end-to-end testing to become more efficient. So that is another thing why we chose Character, is because it allows us to write hybrid tests. Yeah. And
Brilliant.
training my folks doesn't, it means that they know both API, UI, and mocking at the same time. I don't have to repeat them using different framework. Yeah, so it saved me time in training people. I want to get them into production as soon as possible, writing automation test case for me. Yeah.
This is great. Of course, it's tremendous validation of all the work that has gone into karate. So it's certainly very heartening for me to hear this. But I want to pick up on one point you made, Gek, which is, and to be honest, and kudos to your team, I haven't seen too many teams do this, which is actually do a hybrid test where you put in the data via the API, and then as you said, it's definitely far more efficient. And I really wish more teams like you did this. And it sounds great, and which brings me to a question. Which do you prefer? Do you like writing API tests or UI tests, or you always mix them? What's your personal take on this, Geg? Just curious.
For me, I have no preference whether API or UI. To me, is both. As long as if I have to do it manually, I will automate it. All right. So for me, I don't really have a preference. I want to write more API automation tests or more UI based automation tests. So for me, I like to make things efficiently. And there is something that we need to consider, is that API tests are more stable in that sense, as UI automation requires more frequent changes. So for folks who are out there trying to do automation, you may want to consider this factor. When you want to test your UI, it's best you consider how often your UI changes, yeah, and try to get the key gist out of it first, and then write your automation test based on that. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah, and I was honestly not expecting to say that you like both. I'll tell you my personal opinion, Gek, which is I certainly like writing API tests more. I completely agree. They are far more, at least for me, they are easier, to be very honest. And they certainly don't break. I have seen API tests that run month over month, year over year, never fail. If you take the same thing and you have a UI test, it's going to fail maybe 1 or 2 weeks every now and then. I know this is a very, very common. Yeah, go ahead, Gaik. Yeah, this.
Yeah, that's the reason, is because the developers are not writing the test. If the developer is writing the test, client developer are writing the test at the same time as they writing their feature, they will realize that actually I'm breaking the test by doing this, and is it right or wrong? Yeah, so instead of writing untestable front end, you get them to write the test same time as they develop it. They will make sure that they themselves will make sure, okay, actually I need to make the UI more stable, more consistent, because even as a customer, which I face a lot of customers, help them with their customer environment, they themselves also like stability in the UI. Yeah, they don't like changes too much. Yeah. So that is something that folks should remember, is to get your developer to write the automation test at the same time as they write their features. Yeah. In fact, I have a developer which bring a smile to me when he say it's such a delight to use Character to write automation tests, and he likes to write it. And I feel like, okay, that bring a smile to me. That means I made the right choice in in getting them to use it. Yeah. Because if you
Wow.
find it's a joy to write tests, then obviously you enjoy writing it, you will write more, right? As compared to something is quite painful to use, I don't think anyone wants to use it often. Probably after once or twice, you say, nah, I give up. And that's probably why most of the misconception of UI automation is, oh, it's so flaky, it's so difficult to control, the elements keep changing. We don't want to do UI automation anymore. We want to do manual testing. So that is something that our coach should think about it. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I think, as you said, yeah, there's lots to think about there. And I love the fact, again, you said, if the developer actually is more involved in writing the tests, it's far more likely to be what do you say, a robust test that's not flaky. And yes, certainly, you know, I have a point of view on frameworks, testing frameworks. In my mind, testing frameworks should be like what you said, Gek. They should be close to the developer. It should be encouraging the developer to run the tests at least, right, before they check in or merge code, right? And I think that's actually lacking in a lot of enterprises, dare I say that, which is, I mean, the anti-pattern that I see is, yeah, the developer does something, then checks in the code, throws it over the fence, literally, for the team, and then and the whole feedback loop is delayed, right? There's so much of inefficiency in that whole thing, and of course, I love what you said, Gek, that yeah, if a testing tool or if writing tests is a pleasure, man,
Yeah.
okay, that sounds too good to be true. Definitely,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's true. It's true.
thing.
So that's why it brought a smile when he said that to me. It's like, oh, thanks for introducing. I find it's like good. I know there are developers who love writing tests. That's good. Yeah, because I think it's part of a good developer, right? You test what you develop. Yeah, don't leave it to the end. Don't leave it to let your customer find the bug for you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Let me talk about the title of this talk, right? We have, you know, we said, you know, how did SAP Commerce Cloud team find their automation mojo in Crud? And the moment I heard you, you know, talk in those lines, you know, that was very fascinating. And we decided, let's make the talk about, you know, that theme. I know we covered a lot of ground. We talked about so many things that your team has done, and you know how you've really gotten the best out of your team and the framework. Is there anything more you want to add about, you know, the term automation mojo? Anything that comes to mind, Gek?
Yeah, because when I'm faced with this huge group of team, all right, and I was like, okay, manual testing, okay, automation, a lot of misconception, okay, and I'm thinking, all right, I need to find a way, and that's why I was saying that through karate, they managed to find their automation module because they realized that everything can be automated, and they were like delighted in using it, and it's like the module is there, it's not lost, and they still using it, which I'm very pleased with it. And when they have like thinking of this user story, the other thing, can we use karate to write it? Yeah, yes, we can, and then they will do it. And I feel that is good. Yeah, it's good enough for me. Yeah.
That is indeed sounding very good. Awesome, Gek. This is super interesting and helpful, I'm sure, for all of you listening. Since you have used Karate a fair bit now, and you know, you talked about API, UI, and even mocks, and that's also that's great to hear. You know, I wish more teams saw the power in mocks. It takes, in my experience, it takes time for some teams to, you know, get mocks. It requires a little bit of discipline, but it sounds that you folks are really well on your way using mocks.
Yeah, so we consider mock together with contract testing. Yeah, so that we realize that if you don't have real end-to-end integration test cover for this scenario, make sure you have contract testing together with mock. If you can't just have a standalone mocking without checking in the end, does it really work or not? So contract testing will help to bridge that gap, and karate support contract testing. Yeah, so you have to consider that. Don't miss out contract testing. So
Oh, brilliant. So I think the takeaway is
we
that
we also let people use mocking first because the backend is not ready yet. So they use mocking, but we have the real end-to-end test at the end to ensure that this contract is actually fulfilled. If they don't use contract testing, you need to have real end-to-end just to make sure we cover everything.
yeah, that's fantastic. And again, kudos to your team, because honestly, not many teams reach that level of maturity that you just talked about, which is you're using mocks, obviously, in cases where the service is not ready or it's like a third-party service.
Yeah.
But you're making sure, if I understood you right, Gek, you are running an end-to-end test and validating the mock against tests, and that to you is contract testing. You're just making sure the mock is up to date
Yeah.
and not getting stale. No, that's brilliant.
Yeah, because sometimes you will be at a stage where your end-to-end test can't be right because everybody had not finished their integration and everything. You want to test through the whole system, but at the same time, the dev want to do their work. So mocking allows them to get it done without slowing down their pace. At the same time, if you have your end-to-end test, fulfill it, that's fine. If you don't have it, make sure you have contract to fulfill it. Yeah, so don't miss out that part, okay? That's what I want to remind everybody. Yeah.
I think that's yes. Note to everyone listening. Yeah, do consider mocking. It is certainly a feature in karate that is super useful, especially when you have lots of microservices, which is kind of a lot of teams have gone into microservices, and you'll invariably hit that situation where you depend on a service that's not ready, or you don't have a testing environment. As you said, it just makes sense. Okay, good. This is great. And speaking of, we've covered a lot of ground. You have used so much of karate. What do you think we can do better from Karate Labs to, did you see any gaps? Any thoughts on what we can put some energy into? What do you think, Ek?
Oh, definitely. That's one which I will wish to see is easy converting Postman test. Yeah. So because of the Postman has been around for quite some time, and like all conversion software, they will be like things that we want karate to be able is to convert any Postman test we put in. That would be great. Yeah.
I see. All right. So great. In fact, we are working on something along those lines, but I get your point. Yeah. To rephrase, Postman has been around for a long time. A lot of teams use it. It's certainly a very good option for exploratory testing, just trying out endpoints. And teams, I think, yeah, typically it's not just your team. There are many teams that have a lot of Postman collections lying around. And if you could, take those and magically get karate tests, it would help create tests faster. We are working
less
on it.
Technical depth, yeah. Less technical depth, yeah.
So stay tuned, and we hope to have some very good news on that in the coming weeks and months. So thanks for that feedback, Greg. We shall I think we will be able to work on that. Brilliant. And another question I had, which in my notes is, have you used the plugins of karate at all? It's kind of new, I'm just curious whether you have tried the IntelliJ plugin or the Visual Studio Code plugin that's officially coming from Karate Labs.
Yeah, we have tried both of them. So we have tried the IntelliJ and the Visual Studio because both are the supported IDE we use. Yeah, so we have tried both of them, and yeah, they have their plus points with the syntax highlight and also to troubleshoot step in. We prefer I would say for what I see, okay, from my personal experience with those two, the syntax will really help. The syntax highlighting really help us, and stepping through the variables to see the values from Visual Studio. I don't think we can do
Debug
that
support.
with IntelliJ. Yeah, debug support is quite important because sometimes when you write a test, you want to know why is it not working as the way you think it should work. So for new user, debug support is very important. Yeah, for us, I mean, for very good experience, they probably can figure out somewhere, oh, probably this is where I go wrong. But for someone who is quite new, able to step through each step and understand why it's not, firing it off, it helps them. Yeah, when they say, oh, actually, it's now, why is it empty?
Oh,
Yeah.
certainly. I mean, again, it's surprising that it happens that a lot of developers actually don't use the debugger, and they should. It's actually one of the most, what do you say, as you said, it makes things so easy. You can see what's going wrong. You can kind of stop the world, freeze time. In karate, you can actually go back in time, which is kind of cool. But I totally agree. It's just going to make troubleshooting and maintaining a test so much easier. And I think something that's underappreciated in the industry, Gek, is you have to keep looking at your tests for months and years, as long as your systems are in production, right? It's not like you write a test and then walk away and everything is fine. No, right?
No.
And you need all the tools, and that's why I think and we at Karate Labs believe the IDE is where I think we need to spend the most work to just make it easier, using things like the debugger and syntax coloring, autocomplete, syntax validation, which is something we are working on. All the things that will just make it faster to write tests. So yeah,
the user interface is important, right? So if I find it easy to use, I will stick to use it much longer rather than go elsewhere and find a better solution. That is how the market works. Yeah.
Yes, and speaking of go elsewhere, another point I'd like to talk about is when you're developing, you typically are in your IDE anyways, right? And if you need to leave your IDE and go to some other user interface, that is not such a good thing. So it's one of the things we care about at Karate Labs, which is we feel bringing karate in the IDE via the plugins is important, and we're continuing to do some work on that front.
Yeah, it needs to be easy to install and easy to run. Yeah, that's why when we start off using karate, people who are using Intelligent, they will ask, is there a plugin? People who using Visual Studio ask me, is there a plugin? Yeah, it's good that karate support both. So I answer to them, yes, we have plugin for both. Please try it.
Brilliant. Okay, great. I think we are, it's time to kind of wrap up. So let's see, I have one or a couple of fun questions. The first one is, Gek, if you have one message to give to the software testing community, just one, what would it be?
Okay, one advice is if you haven't found your right testing framework, automation framework, don't put off. There's bound to be one for you. It's like all things don't get put off by one bad experience, and just keep trying and ask around. I'm sure there will be one that fits you. Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice. It's like, yeah, don't worry, folks. If you've kind of had a bad experience with test automation tools, the right test automation tool is out there waiting for you. That's brilliant. I just love that, Gek. And final question, kind of, it's Gek, what do you do in your free time?
What I do for my free time, I'm a whiskey lover, so I like drinking and appreciating whiskey. So sometimes I will do like whiskey and chocolate pairing, whiskey and food pairing, yeah, and understand how the maturity of the whiskey works. And so I have some a good nose for whiskey. So I try different kind of whiskey all over the world. So if anyone of you out there interested in whiskey and want to get in touch and discuss about Scottish whiskey, Irish whiskey, or Belgian whiskey, I'm more than delightful to do that. Yeah.
Oh, there you have it, folks. If you have any questions about whiskey, Gek, really, I didn't know you could pair whiskey with things. Is that really a thing? I mean, I just drink whiskey and that's it.
Yeah. No, there's quite a lot of knowledge in whiskey. So I also own a whiskey cask. So I'm a class owner. So
Okay.
I like to see how, the clear new make spirit matured in the cars, and cars are different woods have different maturity too. So this can be another session, a long chat with me. If you like to talk about whiskey, yeah, definitely. There's the different nosing, the finishing off, and pairing with different type of chocolate, the ginger chocolate, milk chocolate, dark chocolate can bring out the flavor of the whiskey. And also
Brilliant.
it's like drinking whiskey. If you have a bad whiskey, don't get put off. I'm sure there's a correct whiskey, there's a right whiskey waiting for you too. Yeah.
Oh, so test automation tools are like a good whiskey. All right. Yeah. So,
Mm.
okay. I think I'll not push that analogy too far, but very, very interesting. I'm also going to think of some more whiskey analogies to use in my karate training sessions, and maybe some of the
Yeah.
karate documentation I'll put,
Yeah.
whiskeys in
Because
there.
if someone who doesn't like smoky peaty whiskey, you offer the first drum, which is smoky and peaty, that put the person off. So actually what he likes is a smooth whiskey that has maybe a young one. A young one might be too spicy, maybe a much older one or better good blended whiskey. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. I'll just read out one of the questions that's come in
Mm-hmm.
live, which is the question for
Sure.
you, Geg. Do you use mob programming? This question from Benjamin Bischoff. Thanks, Benjamin, for
Mm-hmm.
asking the question. Do you use mob programming when writing karate tests?
Yes,
And
actually we did. Yeah.
and
For
and
our first karate test for the whole team. Yeah.
brilliant. And part two to the question, which is, do you mix API exploration and writing test scenarios? And I think you talked about Postman. So
Yes.
maybe Postman is the way that you do exploration. But yeah, speaking of exploration and scenarios, do you have anything to share, Gek, around how you write karate tests for APIs?
Yeah, for API, right? What we will do is we will also to mix it with mock programming. So what we need to do, right, in this case, right, for API, you need to understand the specs, and you also need to understand what you are writing. Are you writing the full backend API test, or are you writing just API integration test or the single API call? So you have to understand that. Yeah. So if you are writing single API call, yeah, Postman or collection of different Postman call, that will work. Yeah. But in this case, we will probably have already understand what is the specs for the API, and all we need to do is just transform them into the karate test. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, great. And yeah, Benjamin, if you have a follow-up, feel free to ask, and we can take that question live. I see another question, but I think it may not apply, but I'll just ask anyway. Are you at SAP doing any kind of SOAP testing? Because karate supports SOAP. So there's a question from Rohit around WSDL and SOAP. Are you doing any SOAP testing at all, or no?
Not at the
Because
moment.
not at the
No.
moment. Right. That's interesting because yeah, I think there are quite a few enterprises out there that still use SOAP. Like any technology in the world, technologies that you don't want to exist continue to exist. And yeah, I get a lot of feedback from folks that use karate for SOAP and XML, and it may be a surprise to some folks that yes, karate supports both JSON services, obviously, but yeah, XML is also supported, so that might be interesting, and you can even convert between XML and JSON, and I can go on, but let me keep the focus on Gek. Here's another question from Benjamin. Thanks. Question for you, Gek. How and when are you running your tests within CI/CD pipelines? In fact, yeah, what is your CI/CD tool? Go ahead, Gek. Take it away.
Okay, so we have various CI/CD tools, and karate supports Jenkins. So we use Jenkins too. All right. And how often we run it depends on your product. So for us, we look for continuously deployment. All right. So every time we have test stage production environment, we run it through all three environments. So we will run it through our pipeline. So they need to pass each stage before we push it on. So all the tests need to pass on test environment, then all the tests need to pass on stage environment when we deploy it, and then we pass it to production, then we get deployed. So Karate supports Jenkins, to let you know, and support on Source Lab too. Yeah.
Source Labs, you actually use Source Labs along with Karate, is that right?
Yeah,
I remember you
UI,
doing that.
yes.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's, in fact, yeah, I can go on and on because I worked on a lot of the backend stuff for that. But Karate, for those listening, right, I think a takeaway is that it supports the WebDriver specification. So any cloud provider like Source Labs, Browser Stack, Lambda Test, even the AWS device farm, if any of you use that, is supported. So you can actually run in parallel your UI automation tests and do some good stuff. Okay, I have another question, but this is a good one for you, Gek. Pavel, thank you for the question. Can you advise some whiskey from which I can start my whiskey journey? Take it away, Gek.
Oh, this is a long discussion.
Oh my
It
God.
really depends on the individual. So I need to understand what you like. Do you like fruity? Do you like spicy? Do you like seaside taste? Do you like medicine taste? Then I can advise. Yeah. I normally will not advise people to drink, generic cheap whiskey. But there are not I don't expensive doesn't mean that it is value for money too. So it's kind of an dark art you have to master along the way. Yeah. So I need to I can tell you what is my favorite whiskey, which is
Yes.
Scottish whiskey. So I like smoky peaty whiskey. So I also like whiskey from Lager Distillery, which is in Ireland or Ireland. They have a sister distillery which also produce non-smoky whiskey, non-peaty whiskey. So you can try the Ireland 10-year-old. That is quite nice. Yeah. If you like
there you have it,
non-smoky
for
one, Scottish one. Yeah.
I think the world of whiskeys sounds very complicated, Gek, and it reminds me a lot of the world of test automation tools.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't mean expensive is good. So, but yeah,
okay,
you need to learn a bit.
Okay, brilliant. I think we are out of time, so if I can take a couple of last minute questions, if there are any. Oh yeah, thank you, Benjamin. It's not a question, but Benjamin says, thank you for your work on Karate and doing this webinar. Hope to see more in the future. Really appreciate it. I'm glad this helped. Feel free to reach out to us at Karate Labs if you have more questions. There's plenty of documentation, of course. You can find us at github.com/Karate Labs. And let me thank you, Gek. This has been awesome. I'm really happy at how this turned out. I really had fun, talking to you, especially the whiskey part, but seriously about the test automation journey that you've been through, all the work you have done, really how you mentor, and actually I can see that, that mentoring, aspect, strength in you, really being used in your teams. And that's so awesome. I really feel this is going to be an inspiration to a lot of teams. But overall, thank you for your time and sharing your story with us, Gek, and thank you from Karate Labs.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to share with all my peers here. Yeah.
Awesome. And with that, thank you all for joining, and stay tuned for more sessions and chats like this from Karate Labs. Signing off here. Thank you all very much. Bye.